The year is 1987. After almost 2 decades of dedicated fans campaigning and waiting due to the cancellation of a promising science fiction series, the second Star Trek show has finally hit the airwaves. Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's not going very well. The characters are shallower and less likable, the scripts are a joke, the dialogue is insipid, and the entire show is tonally out of step with what then modern audiences expect or even want. Actress Denise Crosby, who plays Security Chief Tasha Yar, wants out. Like so many other actresses on set, she has been horribly mistreated, and she will take no more. She quits the show on bad terms. As a result, the character of Tasha is killed off by a slime monster at complete random. A meaningless death. A pointless death. No dignity, no heroism, no great last stand. Just one blast and she's gone. A total waste for a character with such potential. Hi, I'm Spike and I like to talk about nerd stuff. There are times where the rest of the Transformers fandom and I are at odds. For example, my favorite season of Transformers Generation 1 is Season 3. I unironically enjoyed Beast Machines more than I do Beast Wars, and perhaps the thing that's likely to get me the most hate comments, I don't care much for the vast majority of IDW Transformers comics, especially More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light. Now, there's nothing against the huge swath of you who really do like it, and it's certainly nothing against the creators of those comics. I just don't like the premise, story, lore, characters, or dialogue of many IDW comics. Again, nothing against anyone else, it's just my personal taste. So in 2018, when it was announced that IDW would be cancelling all of their Transformers titles and rebooting it with fresh talent and new ideas, I was one of the few comic book reading fans who was truly excited. I'd been hoping for a reboot since 2015, frankly, and this was a perfect opportunity to get back to collecting Transformers comics. Truth be told, I actually did like the first several issues of IDW2's Transformers. The art was new and different while still retaining enough classic aesthetic to be recognizable, and initially, I actually enjoyed the slow pace, which took time to explore this new, unique interpretation of Cybertron. And, taking this opportunity to show us a familiar setting with fresh twists, it was decided that we would learn about this world through the eyes of a newborn Cybertronian child named Rubble. These early issues revolved around the little guy, with Bumblebee effectively being his dad for the story. It's a move that I don't think Transformers had ever really tried before or since. The closest thing I can think of is with the newborn Terrans of Earthspark. But they're learning about Earth and joining a family of humans. Plus, once they got all of their alternate modes, there really wasn't anything physically separating them from the adult Transformers around them. In terms of physical age, they kinda just looked the same. But this was different. Not only did he physically look like a child, but this was also on the alien setting of Cybertron. It gave the characters a legitimate reason to explain their world and how it all works to the audience, because they're giving this exposition to a literal child. Honestly, it's not a bad idea. However, as the series went on, issue after issue dragged out its stories with a truly turgid pace. Soon the complaints came in. It's too slow, it's too expository, we want to get to the actual plot. So much of this series initially was just going from place to place and having stuff explained to us while we wait for an actual story to start. Even the introduction of a murder mystery element really didn't dissuade this criticism of the series' glacial pace. It doesn't help that, for whatever reason, the first victim of a gruesome murder was Brainstorm. Now, while previously this wouldn't have been a problem, at this point, thanks to IDW1, particularly the aforementioned series More Than Meets the Eye, Brainstorm was now an extremely popular character with a dedicated fan base among comic readers, so him being introduced immediately as a corpse really didn't win over many fans. Bear in mind though, we were only at issue 4 and already people were complaining that this comic was taking too long to get to the point. This criticism would only become more fervent as the series went on. The first 5 issues of the series was almost entirely given over to the question of what Rubble will choose, be it his alternate mode, his interests, his skills, or eventually his very path in life. So much of this first story arc was about exploring Cybertron with this small, cute, curious and nervous youth, learning about him as he learned about the world, and the question of what Rubble will become. The story even starts establishing little things about what he can do that sets him apart from the others, like how he is uniquely able to identify a non-Cybertronian character and distinguish them from the others of their kind, something no other Cybertronian is apparently able to do. Now, to me, it felt pretty clear that they were setting up Rubble to be a major part of the story, given how much focus he'd gotten thus far. Well, sadly, we would never get an answer for all of our questions of where he would go, because ultimately, in issue 5, Rubble had a run-in with Quake, for our purposes effectively a Cybertronian serial killer, who quickly and easily killed the young bot. And I have to be honest with you, at the time, I really didn't see this coming. And when it happened, I was not happy. 5 issues at 20 pages each, that is all the time and space that we were allotted to get to know and become attached to this character before the writers decided to kill him. Personally, that knocked the wind out of me. We'd spent so much time seeing everything through Rubble's eyes. He was effectively our point of view character, and just like that, he was snuffed out. To me, this was entirely senseless. Now, before I go on with Rubble's story, I want to turn to the subject of IDW2's writing in general, because there's an old phrase that, in the works that I'm currently in the process of writing myself, I'm trying to stick to. Get in late, get out early. Essentially, the later in the chronology of events that you can start your story while still having it make sense and have enough for a full narrative, the better. Similarly, the shorter your epilogue without cutting anything essential, the better. With that in mind, in retrospect, I wonder if it would have been better and fixed some of the early pacing issues if we'd simply opened on Bumblebee already mourning the death of his surrogate son Rubble, having it be an event that happened before the story started. Hell, you could give the audience immediate intrigue by opening on a crime scene with the fresh body of Rubble being inspected, and Bumblebee being questioned about what he knows. But then, we can play the game of what ifs and should haves all day. Instead, let's talk about what we actually got. Getting attached to this character and having all the potential growth and development squandered really put me off reading the series any further for quite some time. I kept buying the series for a while after this, but I kept putting off reading it month after month, until eventually, my to-read pile getting higher and higher, I decided to justify the cost of buying the series and gave it another chance. Eventually though, the turgid pace got too much even for me, and at issue 19, I once again dropped IDW's Transformers books once and for all. But then, given that the series was cancelled anyway less than a year later, making catching up much easier, and the pacing and story got much better later on, I did regret that decision. Now, the death of Rubble probably shouldn't have hit me the way that it did. Looking back, it's not as if Rubble was some classic amazing character with an immense or stellar run behind him. He's not iconic or especially memorable, even within this franchise when you get down to it. He's just one small piece of the puzzle in a somewhat maligned series, often described as one of the least memorable or impactful incarnations that the Transformers ever had. He was around for 5 short issues, and then gone about as quickly as he'd arrived. Now, it's been years since this comic was published, but I still recall the day that I read it with great clarity. I remember finishing the final page and looking around, sitting there, reading this on the bus, air weighty with the stench of diesel stinging my nose, catching snippets of random chatter from the other passengers, the honking of horns blaring outside. I wished, at the time, for someone to complain to at first, before thinking better of it. I don't even recall posting about it on Twitter, which I used quite frequently back then. I didn't know why I was thusly impacted by the death of a fictional character that I, and the rest of the readership, had hardly even gotten to know. I thought back to the death of Tasha Yar in Star Trek The Next Generation. What a complete waste, I thought. A character killed 23 episodes into that show by a slob monster with a voice like an asthmatic gangster.
You haven't given me a good enough reason.
I mean, she got more time at least that was devoted to her than Rubble, but still with a similar feeling. Not the loss of a great character, but rather the loss of potential that character held. Rubble had the potential to be a fairly unique addition to the Transformers lore, especially at the time, with the possibility of years, maybe even decades of stories exploring his development and growth. Well, the loss of IDW's license to publish Transformers notwithstanding. Now, Rubble has not appeared or been mentioned in some new form in like a cartoon ever since, or in the rebooted Generation 1 based comic of Skybound Entertainment. Rubble is instead languishing in the waste bin of pop culture history, a barely remembered cog in the huge machine that we call the Transformers franchise. And I think that's sad. But I think it runs a little deeper than that. You see, the problem might be that Rubble was barely important at all. After his death, he's hardly relevant to the story again. Sure, his passing drives Bumblebee forward into several events of the story. He is mentioned several times, but largely, Rubble was just a random bystander who happened to get unlucky once and was barely involved in events, despite being our point of view character for the earliest parts of this series. Rubble, as a character, is resigned to the same fate that Tasha Yar would have suffered if not for the fact that later stories revived her for several more much better appearances. The two are, at best, a footnote in the tale of their respective stories. You know what? No. It's worse than that. They are footnotes in somebody else's story. I think then of my own potential fate, of so many of ours. Are we consigned to being the same? It's been said that everybody is the hero or at least main character of their own story. But how do other people remember us? How does history remember us, if it even remembers us at all? Ultimately, when our perspective is gone, when we cease to exist, we are all consigned to the same fate of ultimately being a tiny part of somebody else's story. Not the main character, but just some aside that happened once, and ultimately probably not that important. This, then, is the tragedy of Rubble. Or at least it would be if not for one final appearance. You see, while the Rubble of the main IDW2 Transformers comic did die super early on, the Transformers is a vast multiverse full of infinite worlds where literally anything can happen. On top of that, right from the very beginning, Transformers love to do crossovers, the first between themselves and the G.I. Joe, and later, whatever property would have them. Eventually, in the late 2010s, we finally got the long-awaited crossovers between the Transformers and, of all things, My Little Pony, in the dying days of relevance of the Friendship is Magic phenomenon. Man, remember when that franchise was this monstrous media monolith, when you couldn't go 2 steps without having to walk over a My Little Pony Friendship is Magic plush? Anywho, we got a plethora of comics crossing over between My Little Pony and Transformers, and in the series My Little Pony / Transformers The Magic of Cybertron issue 1, Rubble made his final, for now, media appearance, having an immense amount of fun with his newfound pony pal. And you know what? I cannot express to you just how happy this single image made me. Sure, it's not technically the same Rubble. That version that we started out with is still dead. He still had all that potential cut short, and we're likely never to see another incarnation of Rubble, at least not for a long time. But here, in this, right now, we have left this Rubble to live out a happy life in a light-hearted incarnation of the Transformers, a Cybertron where the war just isn't that serious. Our final image of him is of his joy with his friends. And I don't know about you, but I think I'll hold on to that silly little ray of light in these bleak times that we find ourselves. Thanks for watching. Well, that got pretty heavy for a while. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and please do consider liking and subscribing. Comment below if you enjoyed IDW2 or if you particularly cared about the character of Rubble. I know he wasn't very memorable, but for some reason it's one of those characters that just stuck with me in ways that I didn't think he would. Now, I've got a huge lineup of more videos coming soon, as well as discussions on Star Trek, Marvel, and DC Comics. And of course, more stuff from the Transformers. And the big one, the Armada retrospective, is still in the works. It's just taking longer than I thought it would. So if you think any of that is interesting, then please do subscribe. Thank you very much.